The New York Times has obtained a decade's worth of information related to Donald Trump's taxes. And the information that has now been reported is devastating when it comes to any claim that Donald Trump has made regarding his business successes. Now, we had already known that he had gone bankrupt 6 times. That alone should be enough evidence that he isn't actually a great businessman. But the findings of this report gives you even more insight into how terrible he was at managing his own money. Now, the New York Times reviewed his taxes from 1985 to 1994, and here's what they found. In 1985, Mr. Trump reported losses of $46.1 million from his core businesses, largely casinos, hotels, and retail space in apartment buildings. They continued to lose money every year, totaling $1.17 billion in losses for the decade.
So I want to step in and clarify there. He lost money not in a combination of those things while making some. No, he lost money in casinos. He lost money in hotels. He lost money in other properties. He lost money in almost every single thing he did. And he didn't lose money one year but made another. No, he lost money every year, okay? And he kept on losing. There's a reason why we did a segment called Loser Donald before the elections. It was because that was the core of Donald Trump. He's been a loser his whole life, and this also talks about how his daddy bailed him out on several occasions, as we told you. Now, a lot of this was public information before, all of his bankruptcies, all of his failed businesses. I mean, guys, he couldn't run a casino. It's almost impossible not to make money running a casino. There's even a saying called, the house always wins. But it's got an asterisk now, unless clown-ass Donald Trump is running the house, okay? Which might also apply to the White House. So we'll tell you 2 years he paid some taxes, not because he made money, but because of the alternative minimum tax, and even that was minuscule. In some of the years, he broke records for how much money he lost. #1 in the country for how much money he lost. That's how big a loser he is.
Now remember, the information that the Times reviewed was from 1985 to 1994. And in 1987, this is when he was already bleeding money. He gave an interview to Newsweek and said, quote, "There is no one my age who has accomplished more." He hadn't accomplished anything. He had inherited money from his father to the tune of $400 million, a little above that, right? So what did you accomplish? You inherited a ton of money. You committed tax fraud in order to prevent yourself from paying the taxes that you were owed or that you owed the federal government. And on top of that, you were bleeding money. But let me give you more details on it. His core business losses in 1990 and 1991, more than $250 million each year, were more than double those of the nearest taxpayers in the IRS information for those years.
So I want to be clear about that, because I also wondered, how do people know that publicly about how much money everybody lost? Turns out IRS does publish that information for the top tax earners, but without their names. So you don't know who's who. But once you can match the tax returns to the publicly available information, you get a sense of it. And so the New York Times does that because they now have the tax returns for those years. And it goes to those 2 years, ding, 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 Donald Trump #1, Donald Trump #1. And to be fair to him, I guess he has accomplished that. He broke records for how much money he lost. He was #1 in the country both those years, and as Anna just read to you, double the second person.
It's insane.
So, I mean, it is astonishing what a miserable failure he is in business. And he goes out and says to his followers, and they genuinely believe him, he's like, no, it's actually great business to lose $1 billion.
No, but that is literally the argument that we're seeing from Trump defenders, and I promise you we will get to that in a minute. But let me give you more details, because I think it's important to see how much he's lost and how little he was able to pay in taxes as a result of all of this. So Trump lost so much money that he was able to avoid paying income taxes for 8 of the 10 years. And again, they're specifically looking at this time frame that I had mentioned earlier, 1985 to 1994. Also, last year's Times investigation, which we reported on, found that he had received at least $413 million in 2018 dollars from his father, right? So they adjusted that figure for inflation to show you how much he had actually inherited from his dad. So again, he was handed over all that money, and he proceeded to, like serial bungler, as Cenk says, bungle one business after the other.
Okay, so one of my favorite examples out of this is not about a business. It just gives you a sense of how he's like the Forrest Gump of losing money. Wherever you can lose money, Donald Trump shows up. Like you think, no, you can't lose money running a casino. Trump's like, hold my beer. Okay, so now this goes to that fact. 2 weeks before the stock market crash in 1987, Trump bought a 282-foot yacht worth $29 million. Okay.
Smart.
Yeah, he's always got all the angles. So if you're wondering, well, because Trump defenders, he can lose $1 billion on Fifth Avenue and they'll still defend him. So they're like, oh no, it's actually good business to waste $29 million on a yacht before a crash. It's good business. No, later his creditors took the yacht from him as he had to turn over a lot of his properties in yet another embarrassing bankruptcy.
But you know what, Cenk? The bankruptcies were strong. They were the strongest bankruptcies that have ever been filed in US history.
Well, that actually is somewhat true.
Yeah.
They were among the strongest bankruptcies ever. And I'm gonna explain one thing that Donald Trump is actually good at the end.
So from 1986 to 1988, again, this is from the Times investigation, while his core businesses languished under increasingly unsupportable debt, Trump made millions of dollars in the stock market by suggesting he was about to take over companies. But the figures show that he lost most, if not all, of those gains after investors stopped taking his takeover talk seriously. So he kept lying to investors, and investors eventually were like, yo, homeboy, you're a one-trick pony. We see what you're doing here, and we're not buying into this anymore.
Okay, so here's how that scam works, right? And it's not necessarily a scam, it is run by people back in the day, right? They say, okay, I'm gonna buy a bunch of stock of this company and I'm gonna do a hostile takeover. And so when people hear that, they think, oh, he's buying a bunch of stock, and then they'll have to buy a bunch of stock to counter him, so that'll raise the price of the stock, makes sense? And so that's what corporate raiders did back in the day. But when you buy the stock originally and you put out the news, oh my God, he's gonna take over the company, and other people start to buy the stock because they're anticipating the rise, then you sell, which is what Trump did. It's actually a nice little scam. If you don't care about morality, you don't care about truth, you don't care about any of that, he never intended to take over any of those companies and never did take over any of those companies. Okay, you think, well, okay, well played. You see, if you're one of the deplorables, you go, see, smart businessman, rips off other people. That's what smart businessmen do, right? Except he's such a clown, as always, a serial bungler. So the markets are like, hey, God, we saw you do that 3 other times, you never took out the companies. So on the last time he tried it, they're like, yeah, no, nobody's buying the stock. And it started spiraling downwards. And he's like, no. Of course, and then he lost all the money he had made in the other stocks. Classic Donald Trump, classic loser.
So I'm gonna give you Trump's reaction in just a minute, but Cenk, do you wanna jump in and talk a little bit about the taxes?
Yeah, so the taxes, he now says is, oh my God, this was a genius move to lose all that money so I didn't have to pay taxes. Yeah, I suppose if you never make money, you never have to pay taxes, that's true. But I would argue that is not a business business move. In fact, the genius business move, I know, hold on, MAGA guys, I know you're living alternative facts, but I hope you're sitting down, is to actually make money. Oh my God, somebody tell Trump.
That sounds like fake news, I don't know.
He carries these losses over in year after year after year, so he doesn't have to pay taxes the next year. But the problem with Trump in this 10-year period is he never gets around to making money. So he's just building up loss after loss after loss. So if it was a savvy move to save when you actually do make money later, I'm not sure he ever got to later, right? So he just kept on piling it up until it was $1.17 billion in losses. And now if it's true that he, as he's saying on Twitter, well, I mean, I did this because this was, quote, sport, to basically trick the IRS this way, at a bare minimum, you're celebrating a guy who is doing loopholes while you're paying taxes. You don't get to do these loopholes, and he's rubbing your face in it. Ha ha, I get to get away with stuff that you as an average American cannot get away with. That's his best case scenario.
Yes.
Another bad case scenario is, no, you're doing tax fraud. You're telling banks you're worth a lot of money and then getting big loans. Then you're turning around and telling the IRS you're not worth anything, so you don't have to pay taxes. That is criminal fraud. That is not a good case scenario. But one thing that is clear through all of it, that the taxes make now abundantly clear. We knew a lot of this publicly, the taxes absolutely confirm it and have more details. He's a terrible businessman. Out of all of his projects, he only made money on one project. Everything else was a failure. And of course, the money that he made on that one project was a St. Moritz hotel in Manhattan in 1985. You have to go all the way back to 85 to find him making money, at least in the context of this 10-year period. And even that, of course, he lost so much money that year in other projects that he couldn't turn a profit.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.